Welcome back to the Recovery Channel. I'm Brian Ariel, Treatment Director of the Outpatient Recovery Program with Applied Care Services. You ever wonder how addiction comes about? You ever wonder what the processes are and the factors that go into the formation of addiction? Because sometimes it just seems like it all of a sudden happens. Today in this video, we're going to focus on kind of like a higher level overview of like how is it formed, and especially we're going to start with the brain. So when we think of addiction, we don't often think of what we call a neurobiological link to it, where there's something affected when we take in a substance. It's not necessarily the substance that is causing it, but the brain's reaction to the substances. So if I was to take a substance, there's a whole lot of stuff that happens chemically inside the brain. And the neurotransmitters that are released, like dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, and there's hundreds more. But especially the ones that are in the pleasure centers of the brain, which is located in the limbic system, that tells us that things are going good, and it floods these neurotransmitters and these good feelings throughout our whole entire body. And it all starts right here in our brain. So when we take a substance, what happens is there's several neurotransmitters that are released. One is dopamine. And dopamine is that thing that gets us really going, that tells us we're surviving. If you think of like your favorite meal or the best time you've ever had, like a football game or with someone you really love, those are positive memories. And with that was the release of dopamine. So imagine we just sat down, had the best meal of our life. For me, it's prime rib, all you can eat prime rib. I just love it. After you finish that meal, you have this feeling of just satisfaction, and you feel good. Not like so good, not like super good, but you're feeling pretty good. Or imagine you watch a movie with your bestie or your boo or whomever, and you feel good, you feel connected, you have this feeling of wellness and connectivity and all these other things. That's the brain saying that these are beneficial things for you, right? Our connection to other people, and that we've satisfied our hunger and we can survive again. Well, when we take substances, it's kind of like a reward for not doing something, right? It's like you cheated. So if we think of like meth, cocaine, any stimulant, or actually any drug that we might take, but meth for sure, if we take or use meth, whether it be eating, smoking, snorting, injecting, whatever it is, if we were to take meth, there's an immediate release of like 100 times or more greater of the amount of dopamine than just through, like, for example, sitting down and eating a meal or hanging out with your bestie. It's so much so it floods the brain full of dopamine, and it's a really intense pleasure experience. And that dopamine goes to say, hey, whatever happened, whatever was going on there, that was great. The brain can't differentiate between what is a substance and what is a naturally occurring survival action. Eating is a survival action. Connection to others, relationship, that's survival connection. Procreation or sex, that's another one of those natural things that we get rewarded for. And then we start to seek those things because we may not have pleasure in our lives, and we get stuck in this pleasure seeking mode, right? And I mean, people that when we use, we do feel good. I mean, we can't deny that. And the brain recognizes that and encodes it into a memory. And that memory is used to say, hey, whatever that was, you need to do it again. And so we get into this formation of this cycle, right? And we start to use more and more because we want to feel good. We want to feel better. And then we get into this place where we just continue to use, and we have to use more and more and more to either achieve the same effect or an effect. And we call that tolerance. So when we start to continually use, we gain tolerance. The brain gets to a certain level and it just says there's really no effect. What's going on? What happened? Guess what? I think we're going to crave cravings come in, and we need to use more. So we use more. And I know this is a really simplified explanation, but that's the basic deal, right? We're seeking dopamine because we're seeking pleasure. The brain likes that, thinks we're surviving, thinks that this natural drive, like whatever we're doing, we are living the best life. And again, the brain can't determine whether it's meth or chocolate cake, right? It can't determine whether you just took a snort of cocaine or you're hanging with your bestie. It doesn't know the difference. The only person that knows the difference is us consciously, but the brain reacts chemically to chemical reactions and interactions, right? And if you think of like the substance more like a signal, right? So when we eat, that's a certain amount of signal or strength of a signal. So if you figure like if you're talking to someone in a room and you're whispering, that would be more like eating a good meal or talking to your bestie. And if you think of like maybe someone yelling like, hey, how's it going? That's more like we're getting a message all at once. And that's what happens basically when we ingest substances. It's not the nice little whispering like, hey, this is good, you should do that again, or remember that. This is a big, loud, shouting billboard, very extreme, of a dump, of saying, dump all this dopamine. Whatever happened was the greatest thing in the world, and we're going to do it again. So, with all that said, that's something we can't see, right? We can't look inside our brain because we don't have, with our eyeballs. I mean, they do fMRI and other tests and, scans to see the brain interacting and working when on a substance, when off a substance, compared to different things. These studies are amazing to see what areas of the brain light up and what's going on and all this other stuff. But we don't have access to that. Like everyday people can't just throw someone in an fMRI and say, okay, well, this is what's going on in your brain and this is how it's working. So the best thing we can do is understand the mechanisms that happen within the brain and the body when we ingest a substance. And that doesn't get to the reason why we ingested the substance in the first place, but we'll go into that more in the next video that we're going to do on this. But for the basic thing, if you think that, addiction is a neurobiological response, our brain is only responding to the stimuli it's receiving. And if we're giving it stimuli that says, hey, we're going to feel awesome, the brain will respond accordingly. Not because, there's something wrong with it, but just because that's what it does. The brain is amazing and wonderful. It keeps us going. Keeps us breathing. It keeps us not having to think about breathing or our heart beating or regulating our blood pressure or our body temperature. It just does that automatically. But then when we start to kind of hack it or hijack it through substances or even behaviors, then things start kind of getting out of tune, out of whack. So when we talk about formation of addiction, we have to understand the mechanisms in the brain that keep us wanting and going. Now we talked about tolerance and craving. So imagine, I really like chocolate cake is a wonderful thing, and I like cheeseburgers too. And not that I have a problem with those things, but you get a craving, and that craving is like your memory comes back and you remember like, oh, I had this really good cheeseburger at this place. You know what, I really want a cheeseburger. It's kind of the same way with addiction. At least in my experience, it's been the same way. Where you're just going beyond your day and everything is fine, and then this kind of craving or this thought pops into our head like, hey, maybe I should have a drink. Yeah, that would be a good idea. And then you start to crave it because your brain is remembering and telling you, yeah, that was a good thing. Yeah, we need to do that. Whatever that was, that memory encoded to that feeling is a good thing. So, yeah, you should drink because then we're going to get our rush, our dopamine hit, we're going to feel good. So when we look at those interactions, that's kind of where addiction forms. In our next video, we're going to more like physical, genetic, and environmental kind of things that lead us into that, and maybe even some situations, and explain those situations of how we get to that point of taking in that substance, and then that mechanism, that neurobiological response happens because we put that system in that loud signal for our brain to do something. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this helpful to you, and please go do your own research. Again, this is Brian Ario with the Outpatient Recovery Program with Applied Care Services. Have a good one.